Alright, so now that I have everything hooked up on the engine, injection pump's working right, hydraulic pump's working right, and I got everything situated, it's now time for me to go ahead and put the steering on here. But I had all this stuff put on here first and want to get everything working properly before I put the steering on, for the simple fact that the power steering cylinder support bracket is going to bolt right here, and it's going to cover up our hydraulic pump. So since everything's working, it's now time to put the power steering back on, or the steering in general. So for starters, most of the hardware I have here is all original. There's a couple pieces that I've had to replace, but most is all original. And so it's all replated. First thing I'm going to do is go ahead and put this bracket on. And for it, we have these big 5/8 bolts. Along with square nuts. Okay, and I do not have my torque wrench down here at the moment. So you're going to torque these to 135 to 150 foot-pounds. The next piece I'm going to put on is going to be the front pitman arm. Now, it has 4 splines, so you want your front wheels pointing straight, and this arm's going to stick straight up, and it's going to be way over here at the side. So I'm just trying to keep everything in a frame so you can see everything in one go. Mine's a little rusty from where it's set down here, so I'm just going to add a little bit of grease on there, and I'll get that slid on and bolt it on. Now on the arm itself, you'll see a recessed side and a flat side. The flat side needs to go out. And then that's going to get a big washer, lock washer, and a nut. And this nut you're going to tighten to 140 to 160 foot-pounds. There's no spec that I can find for this one. However, the one back here on the steering box uses the exact same setup, and that's the spec for those. So that's the spec that I would use for the front. Alright, so I'm going to go grab my torque wrench, and I'm going to grab the new steering cylinder. And one other thing, I was talking about the hardware. If you remember on my initial walk around of this tractor, this cylinder was gone. So that piece is all brand new. This pitman arm up front here is brand new. And I say brand new, they're new to me. They're not brand new as in, like, made within the last year. The actual drag link, the one off of this tractor where somebody rigged up a thing to go from the drag link to this front pitman arm, they damaged the ball joint socket, because it's a tapered socket. Well, I tried to ream it out. It did not work, so I had to buy a new drag link. So pretty much the only original steering on this tractor, other than the steering box itself, is the rear ball joint, the adjusting sleeve, and the power steering bracket. Everything else is brand new. So let me go grab other parts real quick. Alright, so now to install steering cylinder. As I mentioned, this is entirely new to this tractor. And I do have a video of me rebuilding it, unfortunately not during disassembling, but the disassembly is basically just the reverse of building it. So, just a little backstory on this cylinder. I bought it for $250. Well, the chrome on the cylinder shaft was rusted, so I had to have the cylinder rebuilt. And for them to rebuild the cylinder, they have to cut it open and re-weld it. So to rebuild that hydraulic cylinder was $300 for a new shaft and labor and everything. Also rusted was the spool valve in here. Well, I had a local machine shop make this valve for me, and that valve cost me $400 just for the little spool valve. And that was because it had to be machined while it was hardened. So they charged more for that. And all this up here was still original to the shaft, nothing changed. With the exception of the grease fitting here and here. This one I still have to change. So there's a little backstory on that thing. Now, the bushings at the rear, I did not get. So, I actually got these off of, I'm almost wanting to say it was a Toyota, but I can't remember. These are the washers for the rear shocks on cars. These actually fit the shaft, so I cleaned them up, replated them. They're going on the tractor. As for the mount bushings, once again, some shock bushings. These are a Dorman 31018. These should work, I hope, but we're going to find out. So, the first thing I'm going to do on the steering cylinder is I'm going to put a washer on it and then one of the bushings with the kind of smaller top hat towards the rear of the tractor on the front bushing, and on the other one on the rear of the bracket it's going to go towards the front, so it sandwiches it like so. So it'll look like that. So I'm going to go ahead, stick my front joint in. I'm going to go ahead and slide my bolt in it just to help hold it in place for me. Now I'm going to pull this shaft out some to line it up. I have to pull this bolt back out so I can get everything installed. I'm going to slide that into my bracket, and I know you guys can't see that because I'm standing in the way. As you can see, it's now installed into the bracket. And I will take some hydraulic oil and just go ahead and coat this for now. Because I mean, like I said, my next step is going to be rebuilding the power steering pump. But I want to go ahead and just make sure this thing does not rust again. So now that I got that in there, I'm going to take the other bushing and slide it on. My other washer and the nut. Now one thing that kind of annoyed me was the machine shop that redid this for me. I put a note on here to make this a 7/16 20 thread, because that's what it's supposed to be. Well, when I bought the cylinder, somebody had cut that off and welded a 3/8/16 bolt to it. So that's how they remade this. And it annoys me and it kind of pisses me off at the same time. But if it works, I'm okay with it. I just wish they'd have made it correct. But I'm gonna put that on there and just kind of snug that down, because I don't want to torque this, because these bushings are going to collapse as I torque it, and they are actually really small compared to the washers, so it is what it is. I may change these bushings later to some bigger ones, but for now they'll work. So I'm going to go ahead and just tighten this nut up some. And that looks about to be it. Now I'm going to take another nut and stick on the back side to act as a jam nut to hold this. And that is correct in the manual. Like I say, just different size thread. And I just realized I didn't put the boot on this up here, but I can easily slide that out and put it on, so that's no problem. So there's the cylinder installed. Let me go ahead and get this new grease fitting and the boot put on here. Alright, so I cannot find the boot that I had for this for some reason. I don't know if I never ordered another set or what. So I got those on order. As you see, I put the new grease fitting in here. Once I get the new boot, I'm going to pump this full of grease, clean out any dirt and debris that's in here, put the new boot on it. And then this bolt right here will get torqued down to 45 foot-pounds. At which point the steering cylinder is installed, with the exception of these hoses. And I'll go over that when I get to that point. So the next piece I'm going to do is going to be the drag link itself. Actually, take that back. Next piece is going to be the steering pitman arm up here on the steering box. Alright, so just like up front, I'm going to add a little bit of grease to my steering pitman arm. Now, I do have my steering box centered. That is important. Just like the front, you want it centered, you want your steering box centered. This pitman arm is keyed just like the front one on 4 sides. You're going to want it straight down. And the bend will be towards the outside. And I'm going to torque it to 150 foot-pounds. Alright, so now that I got this torqued down to 150 foot-pounds, it's now time to install the drag link from this pitman arm out here to the ball joint on the steering cylinder. Now, if you watched my video on rebuilding the steering cylinder,
I don't want to show the manual, you know, because of copyright, which is probably out, but I'm not going to risk it. Ford actually calls for a measurement from the center of this stud to this stud as 5 1/8 of an inch. And they also give us a measurement from the center of the steering pitman arm to the center of this stud, which is 44 5/8 inch. So what I'm going to do is take my drag link and get it set up here and get it measured out to that distance. And when it's in that distance, in theory, everything should be aligned if those are the proper measurements. And let's see, where's my tape measure? Which right now I think I have it pretty straight as it sits. I'm about 44 1/4 right this second. So we might be a little off one way or the other here. But because the total toe on my front axle was set a long time ago in my front axle assembly video, and I'll link that if you want to see how that's set up. So we'll set everything to the spec that Ford calls, and once I get it drivable, and I say drivable because I really want to get the hydraulics working before I do that on the power steering. Once I get that, I'll drive it and see just how centered everything is. So let me go get the drag link and get it set up and ready to go on. Okay, so here I have the drag link, and I have it set to roughly 44 5/8 inch from the center of my ball joint to the center of the eyelet. And that's going to go down on that eyelet. And back here into the steering arm. And once again, back here at the back, I don't have a grease fitting or the boot, so I'll have to take this back apart and do that later. So I'm not going to tighten this rear one just yet. However, you need to tighten that to probably at least 45 foot-pounds. And I say at least because it does have a cotter pin. You need to line the hole up and tighten it down. Same as the one up here at the front. And tighten it down to about 45 foot-pounds. Line up your cotter pin keyway and put a cotter pin in. Now, as you can see, I have seen these arms in all kinds of different variations. I've seen them where all this is like laid over to the side and everything else. According to the service manual, the ports on the solenoid block should be straight up. So this is the correct orientation that you want yours to be in. Once you get this set, you got some more 7/16 bolts right here. You need to tighten these up. I don't know if you need to go to 45 because this is going to collapse these collars, but you do need to have this tight enough to where it will not rotate. So there's the steering link installed. So now I have a running and driving tractor and a somewhat steerable tractor, because like I say, it's not going to be perfect until I put a power steering pump on it, which is the next project. So get to work on that now. Okay, so I got some ball joint boots in, and what I did was I went ahead and just pumped this full of grease to knock out any sand or grime or anything on it. And then I'll put the boot on it. Then I'll put the nut on it, and I got it torqued to 90 foot-pounds, which made my cotter pin hole line up. And then I got a cotter pin put in. Once I got this one finally installed, I came up here to the front. I put a boot on here and tightened this bolt. This one I tightened by hand really tight, and then I checked it with a torque wrench, and I had over 45 foot-pounds, so it's good. I then took and centered this arm kind of in the middle of the slot in here, and that's just centered left to right. The springs will keep it forward and backwards, and that basically made the bar run right alongside of where the hydraulics would come in. And once I got that, I came back here and tightened these up to 45 foot-pounds while keeping everything straight and in line. So that's the steering installed, with the exception of the pump. One thing that the manual doesn't call for is anything right here. And the problem I have with that is that. Because I seriously thought that this would be a little further down there, but it's not. So I got another boot, and I'm going to break this free. And I've actually got a ball joint separator at work that I'm going to bring home that'll actually pop this and not damage any paint. But once I get that off, I'm going to take this boot and I'm going to stick it in there. And it's going to kind of serve two purposes. One, obviously to keep trash out, because this is a little open. But the main thing is to eliminate that. Now when I initially put this cylinder together, I bent this to fit good and snug on there. And that would probably work, but I was like, well, that's going to kind of drag and knock the paint off and cause rust. So the boot there is going to be my solution to that. Well, like I say, that's the mechanical steering installed. So now I just got to get the steering pump put on.